A New South Wales inquiry examining the impacts of harmful pornography on young people will get underway today. The parliamentary inquiry will look into and report on the impacts of violent and misogynistic pornographic material on mental, emotional and physical health. A report published in 2023 from the E-Safety Commissioner found 75% of surveyed 16 to 18-year-olds had seen online pornography. Well, to tell us more, the chair of the inquiry, Sarah Kaine, joins us now. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Can you take us through what the inquiry will be looking at?
Yeah, thanks so much, Mel, for having me. So it's really very much looking at what we don't know. What is the impact? What is the usage? We suspect, and we've had research saying that children are being exposed to pornography. 1 in 3 children around the ages of 10 to 13, that's very young. What does that mean in terms of how we should be educating children? What should we be doing to make sure that when this exposure begins, in particular, the most vulnerable, like children, are equipped to deal with it? So we don't really know what we're going to find. We don't really know what we don't know. And so we're really entering this with open minds to understand from a wide variety of perspectives what are the possible policy responses to what we think is something that's quite ubiquitous out there online.
This figure that you mentioned there of children aged 10 to 13 accessing pornography is quite stark. Of course, you haven't quite started the inquiry yet, but do we know why it is and how it is that children are seeing pornography at such a young age?
Yeah, and I think we need to be clear when we say accessing, particularly for that age group of children, we're not talking necessarily about going in and looking for something. This is incidental exposure that children might see on adverts that pop up, that might be, on the game that they're playing. So it's not that kind of looking out for porn online. It's this incidental exposure, and I think that's the thing that we're really concerned about is when a child is exposed to that, what do they learn? What do they understand? What context do they have for those images? There are, of course, other times when people seek out porn online. And again, there's still, I think, and looking at the submissions we've had, needs to be an educative process about what is being seen, even if it's a deliberate attempt to access porn.
Can you give us an idea of some of the submissions that you have seen already? How many have you received and what have they said?
We've received just under 80 submissions, and they've ranged across a whole range of stakeholder groups, from youth representatives to churches to women's organisations to sex workers and individuals who themselves feel that they've been impacted by pornography. So you can imagine, with that diversity of stakeholders providing input and information, the views are quite broad. However, I would say that one of the key messages that I've taken out of those submissions is what I just mentioned, which is there has to be some kind of approach, some sensitive, inclusive, sex-positive approach to educating our children about pornography, what is real, what is not real, what is consensual, what is not consensual, because my concern is the social norms we're developing from sort of unfettered access to porn may not be what we expect in healthy relationships.
What are some of the possible outcomes from this inquiry? We know it is the first of its kind. What sort of changes could we see?
Look, again, it's a bipartisan inquiry, so I don't think any of us are coming into this with predetermined conclusions of what we should do. There have been inquiries at a federal level and a related one at a state level that have looked at revenge porn, and that did result in a change to legislation. I'm not sure if we're going to have that here, and we have also got, the social media changes which are being put in place as well. So I'm not entirely sure that there'll be legislative change, but if that's something that's proposed, we will look at that and see if there are things that we can do. I suspect it will be about policy approaches in terms of education. What can we do in the areas that we have some influence over, particularly children, which is school and education systems.
Domestic violence advocates have linked pornography consumption to gender-based violence as well. Is this an avenue that the inquiry will be looking into?
Look, I think we would have had our head in the sand, wouldn't we, if we weren't considering if there is a relationship between, violent pornography and the types of violence that we have seen in domestic relationships. And I think one of the drivers of this inquiry is trying to understand the impact of that particular type of porn on consent, on control in relationships, and on agency, and what women themselves also feel is a normal and sort of an appropriate approach and response to sex.
Sarah Kaine, thank you so much for your time on this.
Thank you so much for having me.